All right, our keynote speaker for today is Kervin Searles. Come on up, sir. I came across Kervin. Well, first of all, he's been attending our meetings on a regular basis these past few months, and he also happens to have a podcast about mental health. Now, I don't know about you, but I am big on podcasts. I subscribe to almost 24, and his is one of them. And I listen to him, and he just has this style about talking about mental health like you would talk about sports or talk about politics or talk about anything else. It is a subject that should be normalized, should be at the dinner and breakfast table, should be talked about with family and friends. So to help guide us through that is Mr. Kervin. Come on up.
How y'all doing? Good morning. Good morning. I thought I was going to be able to kind of stand around and move around a little bit. I feel like I'm at my best when I'm moving around. But as the two previous speakers have said or alluded to, I'm probably not the best speaker overall. However, I have a lot of practice. And I'm also passionate, very, very passionate about mental health. As Bill had just stated, it should be something that we talk about on a regular basis. And so when I decided to do a podcast, I decided to do that so that I can practice my public speaking. But I also decided to do it because I wanted a platform to bring awareness to mental health overall. And so I got a certain time limit, and I wanna be quick, I wanna be to the point, and I want to be at a place, I want it to be where when you leave, if you're not able to tell me everything I said, you're at least able to take one thing away. So, with that being said, we're going to talk in threes. Everything that I say, I'm going to give you pretty much 3 points for it, okay? The first thing I'm going to do to get everybody involved so that we know exactly where we at and what we're talking about, is I'm going to ask you questions before we start. So, somebody, raise your hand. We're not in class, but we're in class. What is mental health? Anybody? If somebody don't raise their hand, then I'm going to call you out. I believe that's Miss Edwards, right?
That's correct.
Okay. What is mental health to you, in your own words?
In my own words, it's daily issues that we face that we care not to discuss with anyone else.
Okay, daily issues that you face every day that you don't care to discuss with anybody else. Okay, that's good. That's good. The second one is, if you decide to address that mental health through therapy or through, well, we're going to say therapy for the sake of this question, what would it cost you? Anybody? What you think it would cost you?
Per session.
Sir?
Per session?
Per session, yes.
Probably $250.
Okay. Whew. I wish it did cost $250. All right, she said $250. All right, and the last question I'm gonna give you is, can you and everyone else get a hold of it?
Not in Greenwood, get one.
Not in Greenwood. I do not like that answer. Okay, so basically the 3 things we're gonna talk about today is awareness, affordable, and accessible. Awareness, affordable, and accessible. When we're talking about awareness, that's where I come into play. Actually, I probably come into play on all 3 of these. But I'm really passionate about it, so I want to explain to you guys what mental health is. That was a good answer that was given earlier, but just to kind of break it down, a lot of times when I go to give presentations, I ask people about mental health, and you know what the first thing that they say? Depression, anxiety, OCD, and all these other illnesses, diseases, so on and so forth. But look, y'all don't know this, but Miss Edwards has a therapist in her family, so she probably knows a little bit more about mental health than an average person. But it's very much along the lines of what she was speaking about. Mental health, not mental illness. Mental health is about our emotions, our thoughts, our feelings, our ability to solve problems and overcome difficulties, our social connections. we're actually connected. We all agree to be out here today, right? We all agree to get involved. Our understanding of the world around us, that's mental health. And good mental health. Good mental health isn't about feeling happy all the time. It's not being 100% confident. You know, the three speakers that you've had today, I'm not exactly 100% confident that I'm going to get my message across to you, but that didn't stop me from being up here, nor did it stop the other two that was before me. It's about living and coping well despite the problems and the issues that we're facing today. So, awareness, I want to make sure that we're on the same page. Mental health is not just about mental illness, but it's about our emotions, our thoughts, our feelings, and being able to cope in the midst of our problems. Affordable. You said $250, right?
Okay, is that under an insurance plan?
All right, typically, no matter where you're at in the United States, I'm only speaking of the United States, it's between $100 and $200. In some cases, it can go a little bit under $100. $200 probably being, and it is possible that you can go to someone for $250. If you go to somebody for $200, $250, it's probably a specialist. That means that person has done a lot of training and background. They have a lot of background in that particular diagnosis, and so they're at their highest level. They're on demand, and so they're able to kind of to set that cost in that particular area. But for the most part, it's between $100 and $200, and even that, depending on who you are, can be a little bit tight on your budget. But we have different things, different avenues that we can take to not have to necessarily pay that $100 and that $200. The first thing is there are directories online. Open Paths Psychotherapy Collective is one that I'm a part of, where I set aside a certain amount to go below my normal rate. And this particular, to be a part of that directory, I have to set my price between $30 and $80. So somebody can basically come to me at a discounted rate if they go through that particular program. So we have those online. And I'll give this to Bill so that he'll be able to share it with you. And you can share it with your family members. There's also apps, Talkspace and BetterHelp, where we can you can get on there and get a reduced rate and even talk with the therapist via text and not just in person. And then for people who work, there are companies that have EAPs, which is called Employee Assistance Programs. Those employee assistance programs allow you to get a certain amount of counseling sessions for free. They, in turn, will pay me a certain amount as a therapist, but you would get the benefit of having brief therapy, more or less, for free. And that's usually to no cost at all, because the company that you're a part of would be the one who would pay for that. And then last but not least, we have community resources. We have communities right here in Greenwood that allows you to have access to mental health. I work with South Carolina Voc Rehab. They provide referrals where they pay for services. The school district, recently, I'd say in the last 2 to 3 years, they are now having mental health counselors in the school district. I'm not sure about Greenwood District. I know in Lawrence they do, and I know in Anderson they do. And those mental health counselors are there for the children, but they also have the liberty to bring in the family, depending on the situation, where they can provide, again, brief therapy. When I say brief therapy, I'm talking 3 to 6 sessions. You know, if it goes beyond that, then there's other things that we have to put into play. So, again, we talk about awareness. I presented first, and the second thing I gave you was affordable. Last thing is accessible. That's where we, as a group, can come together to encourage our congressmen and people on the state and federal level to help us out with regard to mental health. There's an act, the Increased Access to Mental Health in Schools Act, which will provide grants to help pipeline partnership programs to increase the number of school-based mental health professionals. And when I say increase, even though I just stated that there are mental health counselors in a district, every district doesn't have that. Nor do you have mental health counselors knocking down the doors to school districts and say, hey, do you have a job opportunity here? Because of sometimes the pay, sometimes where the school is actually located. But in this act, it is encouraging schools to, they're going to give money to schools to be able to do that, so that if that individual comes to that school and it's a low-income school or under-resourced school, that mental health counselor can have their student loans forgiven. That is a really, really big deal. That was not in existence when I graduated from undergrad nor graduate school. So that would be beneficial to me if that was to actually come into play. That is called the Increasing Access to Mental Health in Schools Act. Another act, the Mental Health Access Improvement Act. When we're talking about access, I cannot remember his name, but there was one individual who was running for governor of South Carolina, where he's talking about expanding Medicaid, which is great. However, if you expand Medicaid, you got to expand the opportunity for providers. Medicare is right along the lines of Medicaid, an extension of Medicaid, if you will. People that have Medicare, I got notes here. Medicare covers over 43 million Americans 65 and older, and approximately 10 million Americans with disabilities. However, Medicare doesn't allow licensed professional counselors to provide mental health care. They allow psychiatrists, psychologists, and clinical social workers. Well, that decreases your pool of providers when you do that. Then, of course, when you go into the rural areas, it makes it a little bit more difficult. So now someone in McCormick might have to go to Greenville. Someone in Saluda might have to go to Columbia, as opposed to having an individual right there in their home, in their hometown. So Mental Health Access Improvement Act will allow or encourage, not encourage, but it would give Medicare the opportunity to then include licensed professional counselors. To note, licensed professional counselors are licensed in all 50 states, and all insurance plans cover them. All insurance plans, including Medicaid. But Medicare doesn't allow them to bill for services or provide services. So that's one of the things that if we can get that passed, that will help out with access. And then last but not least, interstate portability, licensing portability. And what I mean by that is I am licensed in the state of South Carolina. I cannot provide services in North Carolina. I cannot provide services in Georgia. I cannot provide services in California. And at first glance, that makes sense, right? I don't live there. So why would I provide? However, we understand Augusta, is it North Augusta? North Augusta is right on the lines of South Carolina and Georgia. Just a 10-minute drive, you're in Augusta. It should be where it's not as difficult for a provider to have to get licensed in both states. If I'm licensed in South Carolina, I should be licensed in or have the same credentials to be able to be licensed in Georgia and North Carolina. It shouldn't be that difficult. We don't have a bill in place, we don't have an act in place, but that's been a point of contention for several years now. If I want to provide services in North Carolina, I have to go to North Carolina and start that process over. I have to go to Georgia and start that process over. And Florida and so on and so forth. And there are counselors who do that. I plan to be one of those. But that is a cost that goes along with that. Each time that I apply for that license, I gotta, it's a couple of $100 for each state. Now imagine if I tried to do 50 states, which I won't at the rate now. But There's a cost for that, so that would be better. You know, if you're a doctor in South Carolina, you're a doctor in California, right? So that should be the same thing for the most part. And awareness, affordable, accessible were the three things we talked about. And I'm going to end with this. 3 things that you can do today to help with your mental health, to help me with my mental health. Last night, what y'all do?
Basketball game.
Okay. Let me be more accurate. Between the hours of 12:30 a.m. and about 7:30 a.m. All right. So sleep. You know, I've heard, pretty sure that a lot of you guys have heard this too. Sleep is the cousin of death, right? But we still need sleep. And with sleep, researchers have found that the better quality sleep, not necessarily how much sleep you have, but the quality of sleep and the more consistency, the greater consistency that you have with sleep can help increase your mood and give you a greater satisfaction in life. Poor sleep quality is shown to predict poor mental health outcomes. And you know, we kind of like our own cars that we drive. If you're riding around on E, how well is your car going to operate? It's still going to operate. It's still going to get you to point A to point B, depending on where that point B is. But it's not going to operate at its best without everything that it needs. So sleep is one of the things that we can do to improve our health. Sunlight. We need sunlight. We're creatures in this world, and a part of us needs to have sunlight. 30 minutes, and this research based, 30 minutes of light therapy per day for 3 consecutive weeks was enough to significantly reduce symptoms of SAD being seasonal affective disorder, which is, if you've ever heard that, that's seasonal depression. On the podcast that I just released on Tuesday, we talk about seasonal depression. So light therapy is where the therapist will encourage you or help you find actual lighting to brighten up your light so that it's similar to the light that you have out there. If we walk outside right now, the light on us is a certain amount. I don't know the actual term for it, but a certain amount that'll come to us that's going to help us increase the serotonin in our bodies. Less light, less serotonin. Less serotonin means more depressive symptoms we're susceptible to more depressive symptoms. And then last but not least, self-care. And if I ask you this question, which I won't because we only have a few minutes. If I ask you what self-care is, somebody might say, oh, going to get my toes done, my nails done, get a massage. You know, it's not just that. If I had to simplify it, self-care is living a life you choose, not one of obligation. That would mean creating boundaries. That would mean saying no sometimes. You know, one of the funny things is that my friends say, they call me and I never answer the phone. Well, that's my self-care. I talk to people all the time. That's the major part of my job is talking to people. So I'm more or less on call all the time. So when I have a phone, I grew up where there was a time when there was no cell phone. I know how not to answer my phone, okay? So don't answer my phone. And if you really need me, then you'll call my wife and she'll tell me, you need to call this person. And then I'll call them right then. Or maybe my mom. My mom's out here, you know, she can always get a hold of me. Even my brothers can't get a hold of me, or my sisters sometimes. But that is my self-care. I'm living a life that I choose in that moment and not one of obligation. I don't feel obligated to answer my phone or be connected to it in that way. That is my self-care. Boundaries, saying no. Self-care means identifying what you enjoy doing and what's fun for you and make a serious effort to integrate it in your everyday life. Do you realize there are a lot of people that don't know what they really want to do, what they really enjoy? You know, we're talking 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years and don't really know what I really like That's a part of mental health, becoming more self-aware of yourself and what I like to do, what's important to me, what are my morals, what are my values. Thank y'all for taking the time to listen to me. I appreciate it.